After rejecting the government's latest proposal of a 5-year contract for the procurement of maize, cotton and pulses, farmer leaders from Punjab who've been protesting since the 13th of February announced that they will resume their march to the national capital, Delhi, on the 21st of February, that is tomorrow. The Sangyukt Kisan Morcha asserted that farmers across the country stand united in rejecting anything below the MSP or minimum support price at the comprehensive cost for all crops with guaranteed procurement. Moreover, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology issued emergency blocking orders against 177 social media accounts related to farmers' protests to maintain public order following the Ministry of Home Affairs' request. And we have my colleague and friend Kartik Malhotra now joining us in the studio for that. Kartik, this has now taken a U-turn all over again. The protests are going to continue, even as there was a huge debate about whether it makes sense to give the MSP in the first place.
And my point is, Krishna, a little bit of leeway was exercised by the government. The government yesterday said that, yeah, we are adding new crops to that MSP list and it will be extended to maize, to pulses, to oilseeds, to cotton, etc. But the farmers don't want to negotiate. I think they are absolutely hard stuck on the fact that, yeah, 23 or nothing. I mean, is that something which is sustainable? At some level, that message has to be drilled down that what you're asking for is actually impossible for any government to meet your demands. And it's not just the MSP, and we'll come to the MSP, of course, subsequently and discuss the irrationality of the MSP. But there are so many other demands which the farmers have placed. Pension. Who's going to pay the premium for the pension? You're asking for all debt waivers. Historically, whatever debt you have incurred, you want the government to offset that debt. Why? And all this comes at a time when in any case farm income is tax free. In any case there are subsidies on fertilizers, electricity is subsidized, water is pretty much free of cost. So, where is the rationale in all that the farmers are really demanding?
Right, we have Mr. Srinath also joining us on this broadcast. Let's ask him those questions as well. Kartik, Srinath, great chatting with you as always. We are talking about the economics of the farmers' protest. Is it economically viable for India at this stage to sort of accede to all the demands of the farmers at this stage when clearly the math is pointing in the other direction?
Well, absolutely. I think if you're going to give in to all the demands, it's going to be probably more than 50% of the Indian budgetary allocation every year. It is more than what India spends on infrastructure capex at this point in time annually. So there's no way that India can look at accepting all these demands. And two, I think the context that when you spoke about, Kartik, when you spoke about the social and the context of all these demands, I think we keep saying Annadata, and there are so many privileges that we have given them over the years. The question now is, it's not them who are the only workers. And when I say workers, I mean really physical hard labor that they do. There are enough number of categories of workers across sectors. And we don't give them all those privileges of guaranteed income or tax-free waivers, one. Two, I think if you have to look at all the numbers, Krishna and I were speaking earlier, the biggest worry is if you give all these subsidiaries and so-called monies to be written off, India might be staring at a sovereign rating downward trend. I mean, where is the money going to come from?
True.
Right. Sovereign rating downward trend. Kartik, this is what we've been discussing for a while now when it comes to farmers' protest. It is simply not economically viable to accede to all of the farmers' demands, and despite that the government has worked out a formula and they have rejected that formula, where do we go from here really?
So I think the formula that the government has deployed is fairly fair, right? What is this A2 plus FL formula? Let's spend a minute understanding that. A2 plus FL includes A2 being all the variable costs that the farmers incur in producing the final output that comes out of their fields, and FL is the family labor, which some people also call free labor. Obviously, it's not free because at the end of the day, those farmers are also deploying labor into making that output happen. So the government is pretty much paying farmers and the farming families an income. it is pretty much like a salary which the government is paying them, that there is a variable cost which you are in any case incurring. In addition to that, the labor that goes into every hectare of land to produce every particular variety of farm produce, that labor is compensated by the government, and hence the A2 plus FL formula. What the farmers are stuck on to right now is the MS Swaminathan formula. That formula is C2 plus 50%.
Yes.
So C2 is all these costs, the variable cost plus the family labor cost plus the possible rent on the piece of land. Over and above that, 50%, the government is expected to pay the farmers a 50% margin. So a 50 rupee, or let's say, 100 rupee farm produce, all costs included, should be bought by the government for 150 rupees. 50% margin or 33% profit over revenue. Which industry works like that? Yeah.
No industry works like that, isn't it? Doesn't it, Srinath? But the thing is that we are talking about agriculture, and agriculture, that the fundamental problem why we are even at this situation is because agriculture has not been a profit-making industry for a very long time now. There is something fundamentally rotten about India's agriculture per se.
See, I think the touchy point that we never wanted to address, the elephant in the room, is low farm productivity. The farm productivity in India is abysmally low. If you look at countries, smaller countries with smaller land bank, they're able to have better produce. Indian diversity of crops is a large question mark, which is why if you look at the narrative and what the money that Indian government has paid over the last few years for MSP, there are predominantly for two crops. And you are seeing actually typically farmers from one or two states who are actually coming and kind of blockading NCR. So is there a message, is it more political objective rather than actually asking for farm demands? I think that's a larger question we need to ask.
Is it politics or economics, Kartik, at this stage?
I mean, obviously it seems political. Why is it that farmers from Punjab are the ones which are leading this charge? And then obviously because you happen to be in the proximity of Haryana and UP, nobody minds the free income, right? Or additional free income. There's already a lot of subsidy. So you have other farmers also jumping into the bandwagon, but primarily it is a Punjab farmers issue as I see it. Political, definitely so. Economic also, yeah. I mean, at some level you've got to understand that Prime Minister Modi has promised doubling of farm incomes, but that has not really happened. So at some point farmers also want the more larger corpuses of money to come in, to be created for them. Now the naysayers who don't agree with the government but sympathize with the farmers are actually saying that doubling farmers' income by any means is actually good, because that is when the rural economy gets a fillip.
Right.
You will see the consumption story add up, and that consumption story, look at the results of FMCG companies, for example. You see there's a skew in favor of urban India consumption versus rural India consumption. But you can't just print money and put it in the hands of farmers, right? Senor Raj, you know that concept. We are not just going to print money and distribute it. At some point, that money has to come from taxpayers. I'm saying you want to give the MS Swaminathan formula, you want to give C2 plus 50%, go ahead and do it. Remove all other subsidies. Include the farming community in the tax bracket, remove the fertilizer subsidy, the free electricity, free water, all other SOPs which are there, get rid of them and give an MSP or C2 plus 50%. I'll be more than happy. Let them pay a tax on that plus 50%. Yeah.
Right. Srinath, is that a viable solution at this stage? MS Swaminathan recommendations are very important, being discussed at this stage. It's a year in which he's been conferred the Bharat Ratna. His recommendations when it comes to how to dispose of crop stubble, to so many things that are recommendations have been so important for India. How would you treat the farmers asking for the adoption of MS Swaminathan formula?
So I think we'll have to see it in the narrative of the larger agricultural reforms. I mean, that is where the conversation should start with. For example, you have very, very fragmented land holding in this country. You have the successors of farming families not interested in continuing the family profession, predominantly because of the unit economics of farming has fallen off. If the grandfather had 5 acres of land and over subsequent 2 generations it is fragmented to each one getting, say, half an acre of land, the unit economics of tilling the land and getting something out of it is very, very meager, which means that they're going to get out of that profession and do something else. You look at predominantly in Punjab as well, most of them have migrated to other countries.
Yeah.
So the challenge of unit economics is a big role. So which means ability to talk about agri-farming in terms of, can we have corporate ownership of large tracts of land? I mean, there are enough FMCG companies in the country, respected ones, listed ones. Can you at least have a degree of separation of who can hold large tract of land? link them with food processing units, and then you see better returns coming up for the farmers. Otherwise, we are going to struggle with this old age concept of what is right, what is wrong. And I just want to draw an analogy. We have 11 crore Indians working in the MSME and SME space. They don't get any SOPs, they don't get any subsidies, they don't get any tax waivers, they don't get any credit taxes, much of credit taxes, they don't get any income tax rebate. And why is it that only the farmers have to get that? MSME, SME, single owner businesses also work hard. They work 16 to 18 hours a day to make a living.
No, and absolutely right, Srinath. And if I just want to add to that, what you said is absolutely right, that at some point we'll have to look at migration of farmers to other better paying jobs. Right now, the opportunity cost happens to be farming and farming alone. What is the next best opportunity that they should move to? So I think which is where it is the responsibility of the government that whatever expenditure is being made is capital expenditure in infrastructure developments, bringing villages and cities closer, and this migration of labor needs to happen for those who are in the farming sector right now to make better income outside of the farming sector, and India also to diversify and keep the percentage of farming as a product of GDP, bring it down like every developed country to a lower level. Right now we are looking at 15 to 70% of the GDP coming from agriculture. Compare this with the US, for example, it is just about a 1% contribution. Overall, if we want to move towards Viksit Bharat, Amrit Kal, all these terms which are floating around right now, we'll have to look at more industrialization and reduce the number of subsidies which we are giving to any sector, especially the farm sector.
See, that's true. I think without being disrespectful for any stakeholder, I think if you look at the 1960s narrative of farmers, we kind of romanticized farming community as Annadata. And today, India is at a kind of a conflicting crossroads. Is it Annam or is it data? I mean, we're going through both, right? I mean, we need to balance both, but at the same time, you can't be subsidizing one segment which wants all industrial benefits but doesn't want to toe by any industrial regulations.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think, you are subsidizing some other sectors also. For example, the PLI in 14 sectors, there is obviously, some contribution coming from the government every time a new initiative is coming in. But like every other subsidy or every other incentive, there is a fixed budget allocated and there is a fixed time frame. Unfortunately, in the case of farm sector or MSP, we are not talking about a time limit after which the MSP would expire. Do you want to do C2 plus 50% for 5 years? Yeah, okay, you have something to move on. It cannot be an introduction, a one-time introduction, and then this becomes a liability for the rest of India's own financial life.
Right, let me be the devil's advocate here. Srinath, my question in between all of this, economically sane discussions that you and Kartik are having is this. There is something called as India's food security. We need to feed 140 odd crore people. 1.4 billion people need to be fed as of today. And that population number is only going to keep going up going forward. For whatever be the problems with this country, we've never fallen short of having enough food to feed our own people. And if you're looking at the future, how do you make agriculture as a self-fulfilling prophecy that people want to take to agriculture because it makes sense to do agriculture? Because even if you want, data is the new oil. To create that data, first you need to eat something before you go ahead and create that data. It becomes a matter of sustenance. So tell us, so many countries import food, we don't.
So I think that's a kind of a flawed narrative. Very simple. We do import some of the food items. We do export, and which is why every once in a while we go into our knee-jerk reaction of banning exports, banning storage of certain commodities over a point in time because we fear inflationary reaction there. So coming back, I think your question about what is it that we can do, I think first we'll have to ensure that do we have sufficient crop diversity. In an economy with a large population like India, as the economy improves, the overall intake of proteins increases. So which means that the traditional farmers who were growing cereals and pulses, I mean, are they moving towards pulses as well? I think here is where the data, the new oil is going to come handy. Can we use sufficient, let's say, climate patterns, ISRO data to say what is best to grow where? And what part of India should be growing where? And that is where I think the grassroots reality of so many tonnage or so many acreage of land is today sowing paddy, today sowing some pulses, and all that if we can track almost on real-time basis. And my belief is the next big digital public infrastructure should probably come in the agriculture space. Then imagine that you can either avoid excess supply, or you can even avoid shortages as well. I mean, but for forces of or the vagaries of nature, we can avoid that. Today, with so much of data, are we able to say where am I producing paddy? And I think that is where we'll have to go back. And I think that is where data and technology is going to help in agriculture as well. You look at the case of, let's say, certain parts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Those farmers, you don't hear them protesting because gherkins, which are very high value product globally, are being produced there and exported. I mean, it's only one example of many hundreds which happen across India. You talk about buttercup fruit, which is equivalent to your avocados and so on and so forth. So why can't we have those agri-tech coming into agriculture and saying, we give advisory to farmers saying that this is this part of the country, why don't you grow this, and then subsidize them for that. That will help us in crop diversity, self-sufficiency, as well as market price discovery. You don't have a scenario where you're having excess stock which has to be dumped in Food Corporation of India godowns at all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Srinath, and I just want to add to that, at some point, we've also got to see that agriculture has to be viewed through the same lens of economic productivity and economic competitiveness as any other sector.
Right.
I don't think agriculture requires any special treatment. Every industry out there, every company out there, similarly, every field out there needs to serve a particular market problem. If the market problem is hunger, then you have agriculture supporting that. If the market problem is semiconductors, you have the semiconductor addressing that. So we've got to make our agriculture competitive, and making it competitive on the back of subsidies is not something which is actually going to help. What is going to help is there needs to be enough infusion of technology, there needs to be enough value that farmers see by virtue of becoming competitive. And Srinath gave the example of gherkins. I can go back 20 years ago, Jamnagar refinery of Reliance Industries, back then still under construction. Reliance had actually put at that time large mangroves to create special varieties of mangoes which could be exported outside. They already had contracts from Walmart in the US and create those high yielding varieties of produce those high yielding varieties which are going to fetch you revenue in any case. That revenue is keeping track of or keeping your foreign exchange under check. You are paying tax on that. So farmers will have to look at in crop diversification, not just look at the India story, but look at what are the best products which are going to fetch them the best value.
What are the best agricultural products that will fetch India the best value is where we need to be thinking, is the direction we need to be going in. Srinath, Sridharan, I'm going to thank you again for taking time out to be with us here on Business Plus and sharing your thoughts on such an important matter. We will keep having you back on the show again and again. And of course, Kartik, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us.
Thanks,